One of the most important things I've learned as a dad is don't go cheap. You'll end up paying for it later. Recently my son came up to me and was like, Dad, I have to have the new Call of Duty game on my iPad. I looked and that thing was like $60. So I did what a lot of other dads would do. I went bargain shopping. I grabbed his iPad, found a game that looked super similar. It was called Call of Booty, but it was only $20. I'm like, it has to be similar. The logos look similar. The name was similar. Yeah, not similar whatsoever. I was in a hurry though, and now my wife is pissed. My kid won't put his iPad down, and his bedroom door's been locked for 2 days straight. I really don't know what to do. So when you hear somebody say, I must have something, it means they must have it, like these two running backs for 2020 fantasy football. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there, and today we're talking about some must-have running backs, but before we do, don't lie. I know there's a few of you out there that went to your app store as soon as you heard that intro to see if that was a real game to play. Don't lie, I can tell. I know a few of you did, but we're going to talk about a couple running backs today that we've labeled as must-have here for 2020 fantasy football, and we do these shows every offseason. They're one of our most popular shows. They've really helped out a lot of people in the past. These episodes last year, we had the likes of Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, guys that we were super high on last year, and they all turned out great. They really helped a lot of people. So we have a few that we're going to be talking about here today. And the first one on my list here for 2020 is going to be Nick Chubb, running back of the Cleveland Browns. All right, here we go, and I can hear it already through the screen. People are going, nope, I don't trust Nick Chubb. Not Kareem Hunt's there all year. Does this dude know Kareem Hunt's on the Browns? Yes, of course I know. I don't live under a rock, and yes, Hunt is going to be there for the whole season. Well, at least he's supposed to be. He's not exactly known for making great off-the-field choices, but as of right now, yes, he's going to be there all season long. But do you think the Browns are just going to ignore the dude that had 1,772 total yards in his first year of being a full-time starter last year? Not to mention, he did it with an offensive line that was below average in a Kitchens offense that resembled an 8-year-old playing Madden. But let's start off looking at Nick Chubb. Let's see what he did. This is not just some dude that's a heavy-footed plotter that runs into the back of his offensive lineman and falls forward. No. For the year, last year in 2019, he averaged 5 yards per carry, and he did it with volume, racking up 298 carries. It's not like the guy was out there getting 150 touches where he averaged 5 yards a carry. No, there was real volume there for him last year. He led all NFL running backs in runs over 15 yards with 17 of them. He just made plays happen. He finished second among all running backs in evaded tackles with 96, and that in turn led to 576 created yards, which was second in the NFL. He got 12 carries on the goal line and 52 touches in the red zone, both top 5 in the NFL among all running backs. But just a reminder, he's on the Browns, remember? The 2019 dumpster fire Browns that everyone wants to trash. But here's the thing with fantasy football. Everyone searches long and hard for those sweet hidden gems to get them on their roster. Then they finally find them, and they look for every reason possible to trade them, or every reason to say, it won't happen again. Why do people continue to do that? Why can't we just find good players in good situations and hold on to them? Now, don't get me wrong. Kareem Hunt, he is a very good running back here in the NFL. But how does he just kill Nick Chubb's value? Because of what he did in Kansas City 2 years ago? Well, it's not 2017 anymore, as much as a lot of us wish that it was. Now head coach of the Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski, he was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota just last year. On a Minnesota team that we saw run the ball 476 times. On top of that, they targeted their running backs in the passing game 126 times. So are you saying that a combined 600 plus touches isn't enough for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt to both be fantasy relevant? And when you add in the fact that those 600 touches are now behind a top 10 rated offensive line after the free agent signing of Jack Conklin and the draft pick of Jedrick Wills, I mean, it's only going to help with efficiencies. So let's look at some projections for both Chubb and Hunt and see where they fall here in 2020. With the amount of potential volume available in this offense, it's not out of the question whatsoever to have Nick Chubb still see right around 250 plus carries on the ground. He's going to be the early down workhorse for the Cleveland Browns. That's not going to change. But there's so much volume here, it still leaves right around 150 carries for Kareem Hunt, which is more than reasonable. That still leaves 76 carries available for quarterback scrambles or other rando running backs on the roster getting a carry now and again. And we still have to admit that the bulk of the pass catching work is going to go the way of Kareem Hunt. Right now, I have Kareem Hunt penciled in for right around 75 targets, 40 or so for Nick Chubb. Both very reasonable numbers. All right, so let's use some career averages, and if we do so, that puts Nick Chubb at 1,275 rushing yards and Kareem Hunt at 705 rushing yards. With Chubb's career average catch rate of 71%, it's going to put him right around 29 receptions. Hunt, a little bit better, an 81% catch rate, going to put him right around 61 receptions on the year. If you multiply those by their career average yards per reception, that'll add Nick Chubb about 212 receiving yards and Kareem Hunt about 585 receiving yards. Now, given those projections, that's going to put Nick Chubb right around 162.5 fantasy points in half-point scoring, and Kareem Hunt just behind him at 158.5 before we even talk about touchdowns. So it's really going to come down to touchdowns to see where this thing falls. Right now, Nick Chubb is sitting at running back 9. Over the past 5 years, running back 9 in fantasy football has scored on average 207 points a season. That puts Nick Chubb 8 touchdowns shy of hitting that average. Can he get 8 touchdowns total this year? Yeah, I think he can. He's averaged 9 touchdowns a year over the past 2 years, so 8 is not out of the question whatsoever. But what does he need to hit top 5 running back numbers? Is that possible? Now, over the past 5 years, the running back 5 has averaged right around 257 points in a season. So if Chubb gets those 8 touchdowns that we talked about earlier, he's sitting 47 points shy of a top 5 average. So let's just say that Nick Chubb, could he get 125 more rushing yards? Sure, that's just about another 25 carries, putting him right around 275. Totally possible with the amount of volume they're going to use their running backs in this offense. What about 10 more receptions? Give him about 70 more yards. Yep, I'd say that's totally possible also. That would put him at 234 fantasy points, 23 points shy of a top 5 average. So we're talking about 4 touchdowns, 4 more touchdowns, and that would put him right around 1,400 rushing yards, 39 receptions, 292 receiving yards, and 12 total touchdowns. It's not like it's a given, right? But those numbers aren't astronomical. I mean, they are realistic, and it could happen. Chubb in the top 5 is very possible. Chubb in the top 10, abso-freaking-lutely. The situation just isn't as bad as a lot of people want to make it out to be. We've seen it in the past with, the New Orleans Saints, with Kamara and Ingram. We've seen Chris Johnson and Lendell White. They put together a huge, tandem year. We've seen Ronnie Brown and Ricky Williams, D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. What about Fred Taylor and Maurice Jones-Drew? We've seen tandems in the running back position before, both succeed and have great years. Quit saying that Kareem Hunt is just going to kill the value of Nick Chubb, because it's just not the case. They can both thrive in this offense. They have an improved defense. Hopefully this year they can stay on the field. They have an offensive line that is much improved. They've added Austin Hooper to only solidify maybe a little bit more run blocking on that offensive line. They're going to be a run-first team. We know Jarvis Landry, he's recovering from off-season surgery. Is he 100% to start the year? Odell Beckham, he's recovering from off-season surgery. Is he going to be 100% to start the year? There's so many question marks in the passing game right now that you have to think that they're going to rely heavily on the running game. And Nick Chubb, sure, Kareem Hunt is going to be involved, and he's going to be a fairly good fantasy asset also, But Nick Chubb, outside of the top 10, nah. Keep him in there. He's a must-have for me once again here in 2020. The next guy we're going to be talking about is going to be Kenyan Drake, running back of the Arizona Cardinals. I have been on the Drake train for multiple years now, and because he was with Miami, it didn't work out quite so well. I mean, he was always someone who produced when he was given the chance, but just never really got that much of a chance. I mean, he was misused in Miami for 3.5 years, and then it finally happened. He was traded to Arizona. Now, at first thought, the running back of the Cardinals doesn't sound that appealing. I mean, you had one amazing season from David Johnson in 2016, and then a whole lot of since then. But we talked about this offense last year, right after the hiring of Cliff Kingsbury. That air raid offense was going to open up the run game. That offense just really opens up a bunch of lanes because there's so many options on the field at the wide receiver position, crossing across the field, that there's mass confusion happening on the defensive side of the football. Sure, the offensive line isn't great, but it is healthier and slightly better than it was in 2019, and defenses can't just load the box up against Arizona. You have a highly mobile quarterback and weapons all over the place on the outside with DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella. I mean, and it showed last year too, right? I mean, David Johnson was a top 6 running back in fantasy football through the first 6 weeks of the season. Don't forget that. He then went down with injury, and in comes Chase Edmonds week 7. Week 7, Chase Edmonds puts up 126 yards and 3 touchdowns, finishes as RB1 on the week. Then the bye week comes and the Cardinals trade for Kenyan Drake. Do you want to guess what Kenyan Drake did week 9, the first game after the bye? Sure, 162 total yards, a touchdown, and finished as RB2 in fantasy football. From week 9 through the rest of the season, Drake was running back 4 overall and carried a lot of people to some fantasy championships. From week 9, he saw 83% of the snaps in the backfield and straight up won the job all by himself. The Cardinals signed Drake to a 1-year deal and shipped David Johnson and his huge contract to Houston for DeAndre Hopkins. So what can Drake do in a full season as the number 1 starter? This is where I start to get really excited about Kenyan Drake. Last year was his career high in carries with 170, but with his skill set, he's more than capable of so much more. He's not a small guy. He's 6'1", 210 pounds, capable of playing all 3 downs, has 4.4 speed, and can make defenders miss. In my opinion, he's kind of a hybrid of a Dalvin Cook, Miles Sanders-esque running back. Now, with his time in Arizona, he averaged 19 touches per game, 15.5 carries, 3.5 receptions per game. Over his career, he's averaged 4.8 yards per carry and 7.7 yards per reception. If you project that over a full season, that's 248 carries for 1,190 yards rushing, 56 receptions for 431 yards. That doesn't sound unrealistic at all. He averages a touchdown every 26.8 carries and a touchdown every 24 receptions. That adds in a total of 11 touchdowns on the year, giving him a total of 256 half-point per reception fantasy points, which would have made him running back 7 overall in 2019. Are those numbers crazy? I really don't think they're that crazy. Could they be a little bit high? I do. I think they could be maybe slightly high, especially with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins in that offense. But here's the thing. Kenyan Drake has a buffer of 38 points to still keep him within the top 10. I mean, this dude could literally lose like 260 total yards and 2 touchdowns out of that projection and still finish top 10. I'll take that all the time, especially when I see him fall toward the late 2nd round. Heck, I've even seen him fall early 3rd in some drafts. What's really crazy, though, is the combined amount of fantasy points that were scored by the starting running backs of the Arizona Cardinals last year. Weeks 1 through 6, David Johnson was the starting running back, and he scored a total of 106 fantasy points in those 6 games. Week 7, that was Chase Edmonds. He scored 34 points in Week 7. From weeks 9 through 17, Kenyan Drake scored 145. That is a total of 285 fantasy points scored by the starting running back of the Arizona Cardinals for all 16 games. That would have finished running back 3 overall, tied with Derrick Henry. We just need him to finish above 218 points. We're not shooting for that 285. That would be awesome. But we want to get him inside the top 10 because that's going to be a value for you during your fantasy football draft. There's a big buffer there, right? If you don't think those projections are that outrageous, he should be an automatic draft in the second, third round, wherever he falls in your scenario. Give me some Kenyan Drake here in 2020. A lot of people not going to be on board. They don't think that he can do it, but why? Is it just opinion? Do you have a reason for not wanting Kenyan Drake? Because all signs are pointing to him having an amazing year and him being somebody that I want on my fantasy team here in 2020. All right, so those are two running backs that I must have here in 2020 fantasy football. Now, a lot of people are going to ask the question, how can I must have all of these guys? Because myself and Kyle were all putting out videos. Well, obviously, you can't have everybody. However, we're trying to keep it to the point of, in this scenario right here, you can have both Nick Chubb and Kenyan Drake this year. You may not be able to compile and have all of me and Kyle's guys all on the same team. We understand that, but we're trying to give you all that information so that when you're on the clock, maybe some of these guys are gone. You're looking for somebody else. You have options. You have all the information you need to make those well-informed decisions. That's what the purpose of all these shows are about. We know you can't have all of these guys on one roster. That would be amazing, but we know it's not possible. But we're just trying to make sure you guys are good to go, ready to go for your fantasy football drafts here in 2020, and we greatly appreciate the support. The channel still growing like crazy. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you enjoy these style of videos, and if you do me a favor, hit the like button. It would greatly help us out here on YouTube to try and reach more people, because we know you don't share these videos very much with the people who are in your league. We hear that a lot. So make sure you help us out. Hit that like button. We greatly appreciate the support. We'll look forward to talking to you a little bit later this week. Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.